So today I want to talk to you about the hidden growth lever of top creators. 98,265. That is the number of minutes I estimate that I've spent studying how creators build their audiences in the last year and a half. I've written deep dives on over 60 people, including Cody Sanchez, Lenny Rachitsky, Sahil Bloom, Dan Runcie, all kinds of amazing creators. And when people find out what I do, their first reaction is this. And the second one is, what's the secret, right? They all want to know, how do I grow my newsletter? So in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to try and share the top 3 things that I see most commonly with top creators and how they grow. So those 3 things, the first one is keep doing the thing, right? Consistency, focus, is very good advice. We all need to keep doing the same things year and year after year to be able to do this. The second one is make good things, right? Create great content. It's great advice. Like, if you don't have good content, the next 18 minutes or so are going to be pointless. But the third one is the one that people skip. And it's what I call the hidden growth lever. It's also the thing that I skipped when I built my first business. So back in 2017, I walked out of my day job on May 31st, and I posted this picture on Instagram, and it was terrifying, but I was helping creators with Facebook and Instagram ads, and I was like, I'm going to do this on my own. Let's go. And in 2017, the rest of that year, I made $42,000, and I was pumped because that was almost my salary at my day job in half of a year. And then in 2018, I made $117,000, and I was like, this is awesome. And I was doing it all myself, right? Getting clients, doing all the client work, everything. So I got to take home all that money. The next year, in 2019, $212,000, and I was like, business is easy. Like, what are people, like, I don't understand how you fail at this, right? It's like, I just don't get it. And then 2020 happened, and we all were sitting at home, wondering what we could do, and up-level our skills and all kinds of things. And thankfully, the online course creator space was booming, and that was exactly the people I was helping with Facebook ads. So in 2020, I made $452,000. And it felt like this, to be honest with you. Again, how do you fail? This is crazy. But it quickly turned into this. And it was because I was doing everything. So slowly, but also very fast, my business went downhill. And I was essentially back to where I started, right? I now know how people failed. And it's because I skipped this one critical piece of the puzzle, this hidden growth lever that I keep mentioning. So after my business crashed and burned, I found this guy named Mario. And Mario runs a newsletter called The Generalist. And he had written this post called The Generalist Turns 1. He was essentially reviewing his first 12 months writing the newsletter. And I was like, okay. And I was reading it, and I got to this part, and I saw the chart, and I was like, okay, subscriptions, sponsorships, that's cool. And then I saw it. $308,000 this guy made with his newsletter in 1 year, in his first year. And I had to know how he did it. And I just went down the rabbit hole. I did tons of research. And I was like, I want to figure out how this guy grew his newsletter. I just don't understand. So I started finding all of the things he did, right? So he added this to the bottom of his emails to get people to reply. Apparently that was good for deliverability. And I was like, okay, cool. And then I saw he wrote 30 Twitter threads in 30 days. I was like, all right, I'm going to make this giant list of growth hacks. So I added those 2 to it. And then I found Cody Sanchez, and I was like, okay, she's doing a ton of guest podcasting, right? So all those little microphones are her doing a guest podcast. I was like, wow, okay, add it to the list. Then I found Tori Dunlap, and she made a quiz, and 778,000 people took that quiz. And I was like, okay, create a quiz, add it to the list. Found this guy named Ali. He had been trying to grow his newsletter, and he built in public, so he shared everything. And 2 of the most common ones that he used were cross-promotions, referral program, and I was like, great, add it to the list. I do actually have this list that I created. It's called the Growth Levers Library. You can get it here. I'll have this in the bottom corner for the next couple slides, so don't rush or anything. So at this point, I'm like, all right, I think I got the playbook for audience growth, right? So you pick an audience, right? Everyone tells you to pick a niche, find somebody that you want to help and who you want to serve, okay? Solve their problem with awesome content. Kind of goes without saying. That second thing I told you was create good stuff. Promote it, right? These growth hacks. Drive them to your website. Get them to sign up. And repeat, right? Consistency, focus, do this over and over again. But it felt a little flat, like something was missing from this playbook that I had, right? And then I found Lenny, and I was doing research for this deep dive on Lenny Rachitsky, and he has a huge newsletter. And so I was going down, I was on page like 12 of Google, trying to find out how he grew his newsletter, and I found this article called Type House, and it was on this website called 2 PM. And it says, a play on the TikTok craze, the newsletter industry has its own brand of collaborative house. In it, great ideas have been ideated, concepted, executed. I was like, okay. And then I saw who was in it. And I was like, all right, Lenny. And then I saw all of these people. I'm like, wait, Alex Lieberman of Morning Brew's in this group. And Dan Runcie and Packy McCormick. I was like, these are huge names. And some of them I had written deep dives about before, and I completely missed this. And I was like, interesting. Makes total sense now, right? That hidden growth lever, other people, relationships, communities, masterminds, peer groups, friends. I was missing all of these in my first business, kind of. I'll get to that. But when I tell people that relationships are critical for growth, their first reaction is usually like, well, yeah, Chenell, like, come on, duh. But there's two parts to this, right? There's the relationship, and then there's the ask. And when things fell apart, I did not ask for help. I was in communities, I was in masterminds, but what I did was essentially join, get my dopamine hit from joining something that was going to change my life, and then I'd lurk. I wouldn't ask questions. I would just look at what other people were doing to grow their business, and I was like, okay, cool. But what I should have been doing was all of this. Sharing your work, helping other people, commenting, asking questions. And so we often think of these asks as a one-way transaction, right? You think, can I pick your brain? Can I take you out for coffee? Like, what should I do? What do you think I should do next? And it feels very icky. But an ask is not a one-way transaction. These can lead to things like guest posts and masterminds, collaborations, and building community. And one of my favorite examples of this is from Dickie Bush. And Dickie Bush had been writing on Twitter for about 9 months, and it got to November of 2020, and he had barely made much progress. Like, if you were spending 9 months on this, like, a lot of people would have given up at this point, getting to 1,800 followers. But instead, he asked his followers. He said, who would want to be part of a group where every person writes 30 screenshot essays for 30 days, right? And he got great response. Like, for having that small amount of followers, like, he got a really good response. And so he didn't want people just to, like, join and, like, not actually do the work. So he was like, okay, PayPal me $50, and if you write every day, I'll send the money back. Because he didn't want to, like, actually take people's money. And after that first one, he had so much fun that he wanted to do it again. But he wanted to learn from these people, like, what worked, what didn't. And so he asked them again. And he ended up doing 50 one-on-one phone calls with the people that had done this challenge with him. And now we know this as Ship 30 for 30. It's like an online writing course. And the screenshot's a little old, but they've helped over 10,000 people start writing online. And like, that's a huge impact from this one ask. He met his business partner, Nicholas Cole, in that first cohort, and now this is a multi-million-dollar business from a tweet, essentially. And his growth just went up after that. But asking doesn't have to be about building a huge community. Like, not everyone wants to do that. So there's this other example from Sahil Bloom that I like called the 100K Club. So similar to Dickie, Sahil had been writing on Twitter. He was having a little bit more success. At this point, he was at around 33,000 followers, but he wanted to get to 100K. Like, that was his goal, right? And so a lot of people might just have kept doing the same things. Like, I got here, why do I have to keep trying new things, doing something different? But instead, he made an ask. And he got 6 other people who were on Twitter, Obviously, some of these names are huge now, but at the time, they had 10 to 30,000 followers each. So they jumped in a WhatsApp group, essentially a glorified group text message, and they called it the 100K Club. And they would share back ideas and get feedback on each other's work every time that they posted. And one of the quotes I like from Sahil, he says, when you start out on any of these platforms, you need a community of like-minded people who are at a similar stage trying to grow. And so after this is when Sahil exploded his growth, and now he's at over 1 million followers, and every single person in that group now has at least 250,000 followers. Now, this might seem a little far-fetched for a lot of us. That's huge numbers. I don't want to ever get there, but the concept is interesting. And this one's really fun. So this is Maya Voyer, and I actually found this not too long ago, a couple days ago. Maya has a background in go-to-market strategy for a product, and I had been doing a deep dive on Akash Gupta, who's a big product growth guy, and I saw this post, and it was essentially a collaboration on Substack. So I saw her name, I clicked on her name. Akash has over 115,000 followers or subscribers at this point. And I clicked on her name and I see this post at the bottom. I was interesting. It's 88 minutes long to read that post. That's 20,000 plus words that she spent time to be able to post on his website, on his Substack. And I was okay, interesting. But then you look, she only has 3,000 subscribers. It's not she has a huge audience, but she has something else to give. She has this knowledge and this experience from her work. And then I scrolled down, and she had done it 2 weeks before with another newsletter. And I was oh, okay, this is her strategy. She's just guest posting on other people's Substacks. And this other guy has 27,000 followers. I was oh, interesting. And so I just love these examples because it's so simple, and it's why don't we ask? If it's this easy just to get these results and be able to collaborate with these people, it's so hard to ask. So I wanted to figure out why. And I came up with these 3 things. Now, I will be transparent. The source of this is the internet, so take it with a grain of salt, but I think it checks out. So the first reason we don't ask is awkwardness. I don't want to be a burden. Why am I putting extra work on this person, right? The second one is vulnerability. Shouldn't I have all the answers already? And this is the one that I really struggled with. The third one, assumptions. They're so busy, they don't have time, why are they going to help me? And all it would have taken was a few asks, and it could have saved my first business and probably my sanity because I burned out so hard. But I could have just asked a question is anybody experiencing this? Go to my mastermind people or the communities I was in that I wasn't posting in. How are you doing X, Y, or Z? Is this what burnout feels like? But I was just too scared to ask. I was just sitting there watching this fire melt my business, and I was too scared. We all have blind spots, and so that's why I think building these relationships is so important. Having people tell you, hey, I see that you're doing this one thing, you might want to, course correct a little bit. But what if there were ways that we could eliminate those 3 reasons that we don't ask? And I want to show you one good example of this. So this is a guy named Chris, and Chris wanted to start a podcast, but the problem was that he knew almost nothing about podcasting. And so he had an idea. He was I'm going to go out to all of these big podcasters and kind of crowdsource information and just ask them what they're doing. How did you start it? Do you have any tips? What should I do? So he went to them and he asked. But first, he listened to all the interviews they did about podcasting to make sure he wasn't going to, repeat any questions they'd already answered. So he could ask those deep questions. And he got all this knowledge, tons of gold nuggets, quite literally some of the top podcasters in the space. And now he has a top 10 business podcast. He's been on the Ali Abdaal show. He's been on Erica Kohlberg's podcast, and even the Tim Ferriss show. And so you might look at this and think oh, everything turned out great for Chris, right? We can all do that. We just crowdsource information. But I'm going to guess you're probably thinking something like this. I'd never have the confidence to do that. Or I don't have the right connections. Like, why would they help little old me? But Chris got creative. And he probably felt a little weird for asking a bunch of people just to give him something when he couldn't give anything back. And so he took all that advice and this is so good. I don't know if I want to share this. All right. He turned it into a Loom video. He recorded all of the things that he had learned from them, and he put it into essentially a masterclass on podcasting as a Loom video, right? So then he sold the masterclass to thousands of people and made a bunch of money, right? Not quite. He took that Loom video and he gave it back to everyone that helped him. So he turned around and took this ask and turned it into a huge give. And he essentially gave more value back than he got from each of those people. And so if you're thinking about, I feel a little cringy asking for help, like, is there a way you can take that ask and turn it into something much more impactful for that person? And so now I have to imagine that all of those people are ready and willing to help Chris again if he ever needs it. And I guarantee he'll make way more money from that goodwill that he's built up with those podcasters. And so not only does asking remove those 3 barriers, but those asks can really deepen your relationships. And even if you met someone like just once, if you had done something like that, they're going to be like, oh yeah, that's the Loom guy. Like, he's cool, right? So if Dickie had given up, not only would 10,000 people that he's helped start writing online not be writing as effectively or if at all, but like if Sahil hadn't started that group, and if Maya didn't reach out to her network, and if Chris didn't curate that information, can you imagine, like, it's just a small action you're taking, but it can have such a big impact. And so instead of having these surface level relationships with people, you can build a more sustainable business and deepen your impact. And the journey will not be as lonely, and you won't have to watch your business melt as you're sitting there. So what's the secret to growing an audience? I think it's building relationships. And so as you're here today and tomorrow, I urge you to go out there and meet people, but remember to ask. Thank you.